To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Colonel David Morrison crouched behind the concrete barrier, his weathered hands gripping the encrypted radio. 3 days of radio silence from command, and his unit was running low on ammunition. The Afghan sun beat down mercilessly on the remote outpost, but Dave had endured worse. 22 years in the Army had forged him into something unbreakable. The radio crackled to life, cutting through the oppressive heat. Phoenix Base, this is Officer Rodriguez, Denver PD. Dave's blood ran cold. Military channels didn't carry civilian police traffic. Something was catastrophically wrong. We found your son sleeping at a bus station downtown. The officer's voice carried through layers of static, but Dave could hear something else, barely contained emotion. Kid's been there 2 days. Says mom's new husband threw him out. The words hit Dave like incoming artillery. Tommy, his 15-year-old son. The last conversation they'd had was 3 months ago. Linda standing in the background with that smug expression she'd worn since the divorce papers were signed. Static's bad. Officer Rodriguez continued, his voice breaking slightly. But I can hear this kid crying for his dad. Says you're overseas, doesn't know when you're coming back. Dave's commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, materialized beside him. The older man had overheard enough. Morrison, you're being extracted. Emergency leave, effective immediately. Sir, my unit. Is my responsibility now. Hayes placed a firm hand on Dave's shoulder. That's an order, Colonel. Transport's inbound in 20 minutes. As Dave packed his gear with mechanical precision, his mind raced. Linda had remarried 6 months ago to Rick Brennan, some middle management nobody she'd met at her gym. Dave had stayed silent, focused on his deployment, trusting that his son would be safe. That trust had been shattered. Hayes approached again as the extraction helicopter's rotors grew louder. Dave, I've known you since Kandahar. I've seen you take down insurgent cells with nothing but a knife and pure fury. Whatever's waiting for you back home. He paused, studying Dave's expression. They have no idea what storm they've unleashed. Dave shouldered his pack, his jaw set like granite. No, sir. They don't. 6 months earlier, before the deployment, Dave had stood in the driveway of his Colorado Springs home, watching movers load his belongings into a truck. The divorce had been swift and vicious, orchestrated by Linda with surgical precision. Dr. Linda Morrison, she'd kept his name, though Dave suspected it was more about her medical practice than sentiment, had built her case methodically. Dave's military career meant constant deployments, missed anniversaries, and a son who barely knew his father. She painted herself as the abandoned wife, sacrificing her happiness for a man who chose duty over family. What she hadn't mentioned in court was Rick Brennan. Dave had known about Rick for months before Linda filed for divorce. His security clearance came with certain benefits. Access to surveillance equipment wasn't exactly legal for personal use, but Dave had never been one to let legal technicalities interfere with gathering intelligence. Rick Brennan, 38, divorced, regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company. He'd started training at Linda's gym, Peak Fitness, where she worked part-time as a physical therapist, 8 months before Dave deployed to Afghanistan. The affair had begun 3 weeks later. Dave had documented everything. Photos of Rick's car in their driveway while Dave was supposed to be at base. Credit card receipts from hotels. Text messages recovered from Linda's phone during a brief moment of carelessness. But Dave hadn't used any of it. Not because he was weak or sentimental, but because Linda had given him the perfect weapon. She'd shown her true nature. She was selfish, calculating, and worst of all, she'd convinced herself she was the victim. Dave could work with that. The day the divorce was finalized, Linda had stood on the courthouse steps with Rick, her hand resting possessively on his arm. Dave, I hope we can be civil about this. For Tommy's sake. Dave had smiled, the same smile he wore before eliminating high-value targets. Of course, Linda. For Tommy's sake. He'd meant every word. Everything he would do would be for his son. Tommy had been caught in the middle, a scared kid who didn't understand why his parents suddenly hated each other. Linda had been granted primary custody, with Dave getting alternate weekends and holidays when he wasn't deployed. The last time Dave saw Tommy was 3 weeks before shipping out. They'd gone fishing at Chatfield Reservoir, and Tommy had been quiet, withdrawn. Dad, Rick says you're not coming back this time. Dave had set down his fishing rod, and looked at his son. Why would he say that? He says soldiers like you always find reasons to stay away, that you don't really want to be here. Dave had wanted to tell Tommy the truth about Rick, about his mother, about the whole rotten situation. Instead, he'd done what 22 years of military discipline had taught him. He'd stayed silent and planned. Tommy, look at me. Dave had gripped his son's shoulders. I will always come back for you. Always. And when I do, things are going to change. Now, strapped into the military transport heading back to the States, Dave understood that change was about to begin. Dave landed at Peterson Air Force Base at 0400 hours on a Tuesday morning. He'd called ahead. Tommy was safe, staying at Officer Rodriguez's house until Dave could arrive. The Denver Police Department had been thorough. Rick Brennan had thrown Tommy out during what neighbors described as a violent argument, and Linda had been notably absent during the entire incident. Dave's first stop wasn't to collect his son. It was to his storage unit in Colorado Springs, where he'd kept certain items from his military career, items that weren't exactly regulation but had proven useful in unconventional situations. The unit contained more than just equipment. Dave had spent months before his deployment preparing for what he knew was coming. Financial records, legal documents, and detailed profiles of both Linda and Rick filled 3 filing cabinets. Dave had learned long ago that information was the most powerful weapon in any arsenal. Rick Brennan's profile made for interesting reading. 2 previous divorces, both ending in acrimonious court battles over money. A gambling problem that he'd hidden from Linda, evidenced by a dozen credit cards maxed out on online poker sites. Most interesting of all, Rick had been skimming from his expense account at work, not enough to trigger an audit, but enough to fund his lifestyle and gambling addiction. Linda's profile was equally revealing. Her medical practice was struggling, partly due to her reduced hours, but mostly because of her increasingly erratic behavior with patients. She'd been self-medicating with prescription anxiety medication and had recently started drinking heavily, something Dave had noticed during their last few video calls. But the most damaging information was personal. Linda had been telling everyone who would listen that Dave was an unstable veteran who'd threatened her and Tommy. She'd filed for a restraining order, which was denied due to lack of evidence, and had been building a narrative that Dave was dangerous. Dave smiled as he read through her statements to the court. Linda had no idea that her lies would become the foundation of his revenge. By 0800, Dave had retrieved Tommy from Officer Rodriguez. His son was thinner than he remembered, with dark circles under his eyes and a wariness that broke Dave's heart. Dad, I didn't know if you'd come back. Dave pulled Tommy into a fierce embrace. I told you I always would. Now tell me exactly what happened. Tommy's story was worse than Dave had imagined. Rick had been verbally abusive for months, calling Tommy a burden and a reminder of your mother's mistakes. The final confrontation had started when Tommy defended Dave during one of Rick's rants, and Rick had physically thrown him out of the house at 10 p.m., telling him never to come back. Linda had stood by and watched it happen. Where is your mother now? Dave asked, his voice carefully controlled. She went to stay with her sister in Denver after Rick threw me out. She said she needed space to think. Dave nodded, processing this information. Linda had abandoned Tommy when he needed her most, choosing her lover over her son. It was perfect. Dave spent the day with Tommy, taking him shopping for clothes and setting him up in a hotel suite. He'd already contacted his lawyer. Tommy would be coming to live with him permanently, and given the circumstances, even Linda's expensive attorney wouldn't be able to prevent it. That evening, Dave sat in his rental car outside Rick's house, Linda's house, technically, since she'd gotten it in the divorce. He watched Rick come home from work, stumbling slightly as he walked to the door. Drinking again, probably trying to process the fact that he'd destroyed his relationship with Linda by attacking her son. Dave's phone buzzed. A text from Linda. Dave, we need to talk. I made a mistake. Dave typed back. Yes, you did. Several of them. The response came quickly. Can we meet? I want to work this out. Dave smiled in the darkness. Linda thought she could manipulate him, use her charm and tears to smooth over what had happened. She thought he was still the same man who'd let her walk all over him during their marriage. She was about to learn otherwise. Tomorrow night. Chatfield Reservoir, where we used to take Tommy fishing. 8 p.m. Come alone. As Dave drove away, he began making calls. He had 48 hours to set everything in motion, and there were people he needed to contact. people with very specific skill sets who owed him favors from his military days. The storm Linda and Rick had awakened was about to make landfall. Linda Morrison stood at the edge of Chatfield Reservoir, her designer heels sinking into the soft earth. She dressed carefully for this meeting, a blue dress that Dave had always liked, minimal makeup to emphasize her vulnerability. She needed to appear contrite, but not broken, sorry, but not desperate. Dave emerged from the tree lean like a ghost, moving with the predatory silence she'd forgotten he possessed. 22 years of marriage, and she'd somehow convinced herself that his lethal skills were just a job, something he left at the base. Looking at him now, really looking, she realized her mistake. "Hello, Linda." "Dave, thank God you came. I've been going crazy with worry about Tommy." She stepped toward him, but something in his expression stopped her cold. "Have you? Because from what I understand, you watched Rick throw our 15-year-old son onto the street and then left town." Linda's carefully prepared speech crumbled. "It wasn't like that. Rick was drunk, he was angry about something at work, and things got out of hand. I couldn't control him. Couldn't? Or wouldn't? Dave, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. Rick and I, it's over. I was confused, lonely while you were gone, and he took advantage of that. I want to come home. I want our family back." Dave studied her with the detached interest of a scientist examining a specimen. "Tell me about Rick's gambling problem." Linda's face went white. "What?" "His online poker addiction. The maxed-out credit cards. The money he's been stealing from his company to fund it. Tell me about that." "I don't know what you're talking about." Dave pulled out his phone and showed her a series of photographs. Rick at various casinos, timestamps showing he'd been there during hours when he'd told Linda he was working late. Bank statements showing cash advances. Screenshots of his online gambling accounts. "You've been living with him for 6 months, Linda. Either you're completely oblivious to the man you left your family for, or you're lying to me right now." Linda stared at the evidence, her mind racing. "Where did you get these? Does it matter? The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I'll talk to him. Make him get help." Dave laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You're still not understanding the situation. This isn't about Rick's problems. This is about the choices you've made." "What do you want from me, Dave?" "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You chose Rick over Tommy. You chose your affair over your family. You chose to lie and manipulate rather than face the truth. Now you get to live with those choices." Linda felt panic rising in her chest. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining reality. Tommy's coming to live with me. Permanently. Your attorney can file whatever motion she wants, but any judge in the state will award custody to the parent who didn't abandon their child. You can't take him away from me. I'm not taking him anywhere. You threw him away." Dave's voice was flat, matter of fact. "Just like you threw away our marriage." "Dave, please. I know I hurt you, but we can work through this. People make mistakes. Some mistakes can be forgiven, Linda. Betrayal isn't one of them." As Dave walked away, Linda called after him. "What about Rick? What are you going to do to Rick?" Dave paused without turning around. "Rick made his own choices. He'll face his own consequences." Linda drove home in a daze, her mind spinning with questions and fears. Dave had changed, not just his appearance, though the weight loss and new scars told their own story. Something fundamental had shifted in him, something that made her stomach clench with genuine terror. She found Rick passed out on the couch, empty whiskey bottles scattered around him. For the first time, she really looked at the man she'd destroyed her marriage for. Unshaven, unemployed as of yesterday when his company had finally audited his expense accounts, and now facing embezzlement charges. How had Dave known about Rick's problems before she did? Linda grabbed Rick's shoulder, shaking him awake. "We need to talk. Now." Rick mumbled something incoherent and tried to roll over. "Rick, wake up. Dave knows everything. About the gambling, about your work, everything." Rick's eyes snapped open, suddenly alert despite the alcohol. "What are you talking about?" "He has photos, bank statements, records of your gambling." "How does he have all of that?" Rick sat up slowly, his face pale. "That's impossible. I've been careful." "Well, apparently not careful enough. He's taking Tommy, and he knows about us, about everything." "So what? We're divorced. What's he going to do, fight me?" Linda stared at her lover, really seeing him for the first time. Rick was soft, weak, a middle-aged man who'd never faced real adversity. Dave was a trained killer who'd spent 2 decades eliminating threats to national security. "Rick, you don't understand. Dave isn't going to fight you. He's going to destroy you. Rick Brennan's phone rang at 3 a.m., jarring him from alcohol-soaked sleep. The caller ID showed his ex-wife's number, Sarah, the one who'd taken half his assets in their first divorce. Rick? Jesus, what the hell is going on? The police just left my house. What? Sarah, what are you talking about? They had a warrant. They took my computer, my files, everything. They're saying you've been using my identity to open credit accounts. Rick's blood turned to ice. That's impossible. I never. Don't lie to me. They have documentation, signatures, credit applications. How did you get my social security number? How did you get my mother's maiden name? Rick hung up, his hands shaking. He'd used Sarah's information to open 2 credit cards 6 months ago, desperate to cover his gambling debts. But he'd been so careful, so discreet. How could anyone have traced it back to him? His phone rang again. This time it was his second ex-wife, Jennifer. You son of a bitch. The IRS is auditing me because of taxes you filed using my information. They're saying I owe $40,000 in back taxes on income one never earned. Rick hung up again, stumbling to his laptop. He logged into his online poker account. It was empty. Every dollar, gone. His credit cards were maxed out, but the purchases shown weren't his. Someone had been systematically draining his accounts while making it look like he'd been spending money on gambling sites that didn't exist. Linda appeared in the doorway, already dressed. The police called. They want to talk to you about identity theft charges. Multiple counts. This is impossible. Someone's framing me. Who, Rick? Who has access to all your personal information, your ex-wife's information, your company records? Rick stared at her, understanding beginning to dawn. He was military intelligence. He'd know how to do this. Linda nodded grimly. Pack a bag. We're leaving. Where are we going to go? I don't have any money left. I have some savings. We'll figure it out. But even as Linda spoke, she knew they weren't going anywhere. Dave had found them at the reservoir with no trouble. He'd find them anywhere they ran. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Running won't help. You made your choice. Now live with it. Linda showed the message to Rick, who threw his phone against the wall in frustration. What does he want? Money? I'll pay him back everything. It's not about money. Linda sank into a chair, finally understanding the magnitude of what they were facing. He wants us to suffer. He wants us to lose everything we care about, just like we took everything from him. This is insane. We can go to the police, tell them he's harassing us. Linda almost laughed. And tell them what? That my ex-husband, a decorated Army colonel, is using his military training to expose your real crimes? That he's proving you actually did steal your ex-wife's identities and embezzle from your company? Rick's face went gray. How could he know about that? Because he's smarter than us, Rick. He's been planning this since before we even got together. We played right into his hands. The morning brought new horrors. Rick's company had filed criminal charges for embezzlement. His ex-wives were pursuing civil suits for identity theft. The IRS had frozen Linda's accounts pending investigation into Rick's fraudulent tax filings. But the worst was yet to come. Linda arrived at her medical practice to find it surrounded by news vans. Her office manager, Mrs. Chun, met her at the door with tears in her eyes. Dr. Morrison, I'm so sorry. The state medical board is here. Someone filed a complaint about prescription drug abuse. Linda's knees nearly gave out. She'd been taking anxiety medication, legitimately prescribed, but she'd been taking more than recommended. Much more. They're doing a surprise audit of your records. They found discrepancies in your prescription logs. Linda knew exactly what they'd found. She'd been writing herself prescriptions under patient names, small amounts, but over time it added up. She'd told herself it wasn't really stealing. She needed the medication to cope with the stress of her divorce, her failing practice, her guilt over Tommy. Dr. Morrison? I'm Agent Williams, State Medical Board. A stern woman in a business suit approached with a clipboard. We need to discuss some irregularities in your prescription records. As Linda was led into her own office for questioning, she caught sight of a familiar figure across the street. Dave stood next to a black SUV, watching with the same detached interest he'd shown at the reservoir. He'd destroyed Rick's life in 3 days. Now it was her turn. Tommy Morrison sat in his father's hotel suite, staring at the news coverage of his mother's arrest. Dr. Linda Morrison, charged with prescription fraud and drug abuse, led away in handcuffs from her own medical practice. Rick Brennan, wanted on multiple felony charges, had disappeared. Dad, did you do this? Dave looked up from his laptop, where he'd been monitoring police scanners and news feeds. Do what? All of this. Mom getting arrested, Rick's problems, everything. Dave studied his son carefully. Tommy was 15, but looked older, aged by the trauma of watching his family disintegrate. He deserved the truth, or at least part of it. Tommy, your mother made choices. She chose to abuse prescription drugs. She chose to falsify medical records. She chose to stay with Rick while he threw you out of your home. I didn't make those choices for her. But you exposed them. I revealed the truth. There's a difference. Tommy was quiet for a long moment. Good. Dave raised an eyebrow. Good. Rick hurt me, Dad. Not just throwing me out. He said things. About you, about our family. He made Mom choose between him and me, and she chose him. Tommy's voice was steady, but Dave could see the pain in his eyes. If you destroyed him, then good. He deserved it. Dave felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. Tommy was developing the same ruthless pragmatism that had served Dave well in his military career. It was a useful trait, but a dangerous one. What happens now? Tommy asked. Now we wait. Your mother will likely get probation for the prescription charges if she agrees to treatment. Rick will probably flee the state rather than face trial. And you'll come live with me permanently. Will Mom try to fight for custody? Dave shook his head. She won't be in a position to fight anything for a while. And even if she were, he paused, considering how much to tell his son. I have documentation of everything she's done, Tommy. Every choice she made that put you in danger. No judge would award custody to someone who abandoned their child. Tommy nodded, then asked quietly, Dad, are you going to hurt Rick? The question hung in the air between them. Dave had been asking himself the same thing for days. Rick Brennan was broken, financially ruined, facing years in prison if caught. From a strategic standpoint, he was no longer a threat. But strategy wasn't the only factor. What would you want me to do? Tommy considered this seriously. I want him to know what it feels like to have nowhere to go. To be scared and alone and have nobody who cares about you. Dave smiled grimly. I think he already knows that feeling. Dave's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know you're doing this. I know it's you. Dave showed the message to Tommy. Rick? Probably. He's getting desperate. Another message. Meet me tonight. Warehouse District, 1247 Industrial Way. Come alone, or I start talking to reporters about military officers using classified resources for personal vendettas. Tommy read over Dave's shoulder. He's threatening you. He's panicking. Desperate people make stupid decisions. Are you going? Dave was already reaching for his jacket. Of course. Dad, be careful. He's got nothing left to lose. Dave paused at the door. Tommy, what's the difference between a soldier and a civilian? I don't know. A soldier understands that there are worse things than dying. Rick Brennan is about to learn that lesson. The warehouse district was deserted at 11 p.m., just shadows and empty buildings. Dave arrived early, as was his habit, and conducted surveillance from a position that gave him clear sight lines and multiple exit routes. Rick's car pulled up at exactly midnight, a battered sedan that had probably cost him his last few $100s. Rick emerged looking haggard, desperate, and dangerous in the way that cornered animals were dangerous. Dave approached from the shadows, noting that Rick's hands were shaking and his movements were erratic. Alcohol, desperation, or both? You came, Rick said. You asked me to. I know what you did. All of it. The bank accounts, the credit cards, the tips to the police about Linda's prescription abuse. You destroyed our lives. You destroyed your own lives. I just made sure people knew about it. Rick pulled a gun from his jacket. A cheap revolver, probably purchased illegally. His hands were shaking so badly, he could barely hold it steady. You're going to call off the dogs. Make this all go away, or I'm going to kill you right here. Dave didn't even flinch. Rick, you're holding that gun like someone who's never fired one before. Your hands are shaking, you're standing too close, and you haven't even checked to see if it's loaded. Shut up. I'm serious. So am I. Dave took a step closer. You think this is the first time someone's pointed a gun at me? You think you're the most dangerous person I've faced. Rick's finger tightened on the trigger, but nothing happened. Dave had already moved, closing the distance between them in 2 quick steps. The gun went flying. Rick went down hard, and Dave stood over him with cold satisfaction. The gun was empty, Rick. Has been since you bought it from that dealer downtown. The one who works with the FBI to catch people stupid enough to buy illegal weapons. Rick stared up at him in horror. You knew? I've been watching you for 3 days. I knew you'd try something desperate. Dave knelt down beside Rick. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to disappear. Tonight. You're going to run as far and as fast as you can, and you're never going to contact Linda or Tommy again. And if I don't, Dave smiled, the same cold smile Linda had seen at the reservoir. Then I stop playing games and start treating you like an actual enemy combatant. Rick scrambled to his feet and ran for his car, leaving the empty gun behind. Dave watched him drive away, knowing he'd never see Rick Brennan again. But the storm wasn't over yet. Linda Morrison sat in the county jail holding cell, her designer clothes replaced with an orange jumpsuit. Her lawyer, Margaret Hayes, expensive but effective, sat across from her in the visiting room with a stack of legal documents. The DA is offering a plea deal, Margaret said without preamble. Plead guilty to the prescription fraud charges, agree to drug treatment, surrender your medical license, and you'll get 2 years probation. What's the alternative? Trial, where they'll present evidence of systematic prescription abuse going back 18 months, plus potential conspiracy charges involving Rick Brennan's financial crimes. Linda's stomach dropped. Conspiracy? I didn't know about Rick's problems. Margaret's expression was skeptical. Linda, they have bank records showing you made deposits from accounts that were funded by Rick's embezzlement. You might not have known the details, but a prosecutor will argue you knew the money was dirty. How is that possible? I never. Linda stopped, remembering the cash Rick had given her over the past months. Small amounts. He'd said they were bonuses from work. Oh God. Exactly. Take the plea deal. What about custody of Tommy? Margaret's expression softened slightly. Linda, you need to focus on staying out of prison. Your ex-husband has already filed for permanent custody, and given the circumstances, he's doing this. Dave is orchestrating all of it. Even if that's true, it doesn't matter. The evidence against you is real. The crimes are real. Your best option is to accept responsibility and move forward. Linda signed the plea agreement with shaking hands, officially ending her medical career and any hope of regaining custody of her son. As Margaret left, Linda was allowed one phone call. She dialed Dave's number. Hello, Linda. Are you satisfied now? You've destroyed everything. I haven't destroyed anything. I've simply revealed who you really are. You manipulated everything. You planned this from the beginning. I planned for the possibility that you would continue making destructive choices. You exceeded my expectations. Linda felt tears streaming down her face. I want to see Tommy. That's between you and him. He's old enough to make his own decisions about contact with you. Dave, please. I know I made mistakes, but he's my son too. You gave up the right to call him your son when you watched Rick throw him onto the street. Dave's voice was implacable. Tommy knows what you chose, Linda. He knows you picked Rick over him. I was confused, scared. You were selfish. Just like you were selfish when you had your affair, selfish when you lied about me to get a better divorce settlement, and selfish when you chose drugs over your patient's well-being. Linda sobbed into the phone. What do you want from me? Nothing. You're irrelevant now. The line went dead. 6 months later, Dave stood in the kitchen of his new house in Monument, Colorado, making breakfast for Tommy. His son had grown 3 inches and put on 15 pounds of healthy weight since coming to live with him permanently. Dad, I got accepted to the military academy prep program. Dave looked up from the eggs he was scrambling. Colorado Springs. Yeah, full scholarship. They said my grades and the recommendation letters were exceptional. Dave smiled. He'd called in several favors to get Tommy into the preparatory program, but his son had earned it with his academic performance and resilience. How do you feel about that? Tommy considered the question seriously, a trait he'd inherited from Dave. I want to serve, like you did, but I also want to understand why people make the choices they make. Psychology, maybe, or intelligence work. I want to understand how to protect people from making the kind of mistakes Mom made. Dave nodded, proud of his son's maturity but concerned about the implications. Tommy was developing the same analytical mindset that had made Dave successful in military intelligence, and the same ruthless pragmatism that had destroyed Linda and Rick. Tommy, what happened to your mother and Rick? Was justice? Tommy interrupted. They made choices that hurt people. You made sure they faced consequences for those choices. And if someday you have to make similar decisions? Tommy met his father's eyes steadily. Then I'll make them, just like you did. Dave's phone buzzed with a news alert. Rick Brennan had been found dead in a motel room in Nevada, apparent suicide. There was no note, but police found evidence of massive gambling debts and pending federal charges. Tommy read the alert over Dave's shoulder. Do you feel bad about it? Dave considered the question. Rick had made his own choices, right up to the end. Dave had simply ensured that those choices had consequences. No, Dave said finally. I don't. That afternoon, Dave received an unexpected visitor. Linda Morrison, thinner, older, wearing clothes from a thrift store instead of designer boutiques. She'd been released from supervised probation early for good behavior and completion of her drug treatment program. I came to see Tommy, she said when Dave answered the door. He's at school. I know. I've been watching the house. She saw Dave's expression change and quickly added, not stalking, just trying to get the courage to knock. Dave didn't invite her in, but he didn't close the door either. How is he? He's thriving. Honor roll, accepted to military academy prep, lots of friends. He's become quite the chess player. Linda smiled sadly. He always liked strategy games. He's also decided he doesn't want to see you. The words hit Linda like a physical blow. Ever. He says maybe when he's older. When he's had time to process everything that happened. Dave, I know I can't undo what I did, but I am sorry. About Tommy, about our marriage, about all of it. Dave studied her for a long moment. She looked genuinely remorseful, broken down, and rebuilt into something resembling humility. But it was too little, too late. Linda, you made a choice to betray your family. Tommy was collateral damage in your affair, and when Rick showed his true nature, you chose him over your son. Some things can't be forgiven. Not even after I've lost everything. Not even after Rick is gone. Consequences aren't meant to be temporary, Linda. They're meant to be permanent. That's what makes them consequences instead of just inconveniences. Linda nodded, tears streaming down her face. Will you tell Tommy I came by? That I love him. I'll tell him you came by. As Linda walked away, Dave felt something he hadn't expected, a twinge of pity. She destroyed her own life through selfishness and poor judgment, but she was still Tommy's mother. Still the woman he'd once loved enough to marry. But pity wasn't forgiveness, and it certainly wasn't reconciliation. 2 years later, Dave stood in the audience at Tommy's high school graduation. His son was valedictorian, headed to West Point in the fall with a full scholarship and a bright future ahead of him. After the ceremony, as they walked to the car, Tommy asked, do you think Mom will try to contact me when I turn 18? Probably. What will you do if she does? Tommy was quiet for several blocks. I don't know. Part of me misses her. But part of me remembers watching her choose Rick over me, and I think some betrayals are unforgivable. Dave felt a complex mix of pride and concern. Tommy had learned the lesson Dave had tried to teach, that actions have consequences, that loyalty matters, that some lines once crossed can never be uncrossed. But he'd also learned to be unforgiving, unbending, potentially as ruthless as Dave himself. Tommy, there's something important you need to understand about forgiveness. What's that? It's not about the other person. It's about you. Carrying anger and resentment is like carrying a heavy pack. It slows you down, makes you tired, prevents you from moving forward effectively. Tommy considered this. Are you saying I should forgive Mom? I'm saying you should do whatever allows you to be the man you want to be. If that's forgiveness, fine. If it's maintaining distance while wishing her well, that's fine too. But don't let her choices define the rest of your life. That evening, Dave sat on his porch watching the sunset over the Colorado mountains. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Congratulations on Tommy's graduation. I saw the announcement in the paper. I'm proud of him, and I understand why he doesn't want to see me. Please tell him I love him, and I hope he has a wonderful life. I won't contact either of you again. Dave stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. Tommy emerged from the house, carrying 2 beers. At 18, he was nearly as tall as Dave and had inherited his father's steady presence and calculating intelligence. What are you thinking about, Dad? The future. Your future. Any regrets about what happened with Mom and Rick? Dave accepted the beer and took a long drink. Rick Brennan destroyed his own life with greed and poor judgment. Your mother destroyed hers with selfishness and betrayal. I simply made sure the truth came to light. And if you had to do it again? Dave met his son's eyes. I'd do exactly the same thing. Some lines can't be crossed without consequences. Some betrayals can't be forgiven or forgotten. Tommy nodded, understanding. What if someone betrays me someday? Then you'll handle it. You'll make the hard choices, accept the difficult truths, and move forward. Because that's what we do, Tommy. We protect what matters, we punish those who threaten it, and we never forget who we can trust. As the sun set behind the mountains, father and son sat in comfortable silence, both understanding that the storm that had torn their family apart had also forged them into something stronger, harder, and utterly uncompromising. Linda Morrison was gone from their lives, not through death, but through the complete severing of emotional bonds. Rick Brennan was dead, a cautionary tale about the price of crossing a man like Dave Morrison. And Tommy Morrison was about to begin his own journey, armed with the knowledge that loyalty was everything, betrayal was unforgivable, and some storms, once weathered, left you stronger than before. The storm had passed. In its wake, the survivors had learned to never again take shelter for granted. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.